morning. Thank you for having me again here to talk to you about what we do at the center and essentially try to bring some numbers in what the minister was discussing in the morning and what Arturo was saying a little bit earlier. I'm particularly happy to be here because this year we celebrate the publication of the 30th edition of the yearbook. And I would like to tell you that Thailand has been a member of this group that we study every year since the very, very beginning. So what I will try to do is I will try to bring some numbers in what the Minister of the Economy was discussing earlier today, and I will also try to bring a little bit of a format and a framework in what Professor Brice was discussing earlier. At the center, and given the mission that Professor Brice was discussing before, we are producing 3 different rankings. We are producing the ranking where we study 63 economies with respect to their competitiveness, the overall competitiveness. And then from research that we have done in the center the last 3 years, we have found out that there are 2 extremely important components that are very highly correlated, both with how successful countries are, but also very importantly, with how successful businesses are. And this has to do with the talent, the management and development of the human part of the process, and also with innovation, the digitalization that the new technologies are bringing into our lives. So in essence, what we have is in addition to the competitiveness ranking, a ranking which is related to the digital competitiveness of the countries, and this was actually launched less than a month ago. And finally, we have the World Talent Ranking. It's launched every year in November. In what follows, I will discuss with you the first 2 rankings. I will discuss about the world competitiveness and about the digital. And you can see the 3 highest ranking countries in all the rankings that we produce. And as Professor Brice was discussing before, you see exactly what the digital rankings bring. So the way that we define competitiveness, it's very, very important, is the ability of a country to facilitate an environment within which there will be a sustainable value creation. And in this setup, we see the government playing a fundamental role, and plays a fundamental role in building the environment within which this value creation is going to take place. Professor Brice was very, very clear before saying that this is not actually a passive position, but the government must work effectively in order to provide the most enduring environment within which the value creation will going to take place. Who's going to bring the value creation? With the help of the environment that the government will build is the business is the private sector. And these 2 components need, of course, to base their efforts in a sustainable infrastructure. And this infrastructure does not deal only with basic transportation and telecommunication issues, but very, very importantly, it includes the environment, it includes health, it includes the education, the things that the Minister of the Economy mentioned this morning. And these 3 components, these 3 factors, provide, of course, the economic performance, the ability of the economy to facilitate company long-term profitability and job creation. So in this model, what we have is this past year, these are the first 5 countries that ranked the highest, and here is the 10 first. Professor Brice mentioned before that we don't really see a particular recipe. We do not see one particular path that a country can take in order to enhance its competitiveness. As a matter of fact, if we add the first 15, you will see that political regime is not really a factor. We see a plethora of different ways of managing a country. We see that the size is not a fundamental component, because you see small economies, city-state economies essentially, but you also see very, very large economies. You see economies with different economic models, manufacturing, export-oriented, import-oriented. And of course, you see all the geographic regions of the world, except probably Latin America in this particular issue. So, given this, what are the elements that drive the competitiveness? And these come from the rankings of the 4 factors that I discussed before. And as you can see, government efficiency, it's exactly what Professor Brice was saying before, is a fundamental reason why some of the countries rank so highly. But of course, depending on the economic model, depending on the economic development level, and depending on the natural resources that different economies have, the competitiveness is driven by other factors as well. It may be driven by how efficient the business sector of a country is. See, for example, Hong Kong. See the Netherlands. See UAE. Again, 3 examples with completely different political regimes and maybe different economic models. So how do we come up with this particular ranking? And let me go through the World Competitiveness Yearbook issues and tell you. What we do is we actually have and we study 258 different criteria. These 258 criteria are basically then boiled down in the 4 factors that we were discussing. The 4 factors are the outcome of 20 sub-factors. The criteria belong into 2 different categories. There are hard data. These are data that we gather from international organizations like the IMF, the World Bank, the OECD. And the reason that we rely on them is because they gather and they homogenize the different data from all the countries, so they can compare between different countries. And then we have some soft data. We have the responses in a lengthy, actually, survey that we ask every year mid and upper level managers, the executive of the private sector, to give us their opinion, their perception about the competitiveness level of the country. This is very, very important, because in some respect, the hard data determine what exactly the competitiveness level is right now. But the answers, the responses to the questions provide us with a future looking, provides us with how the business sector perceives the general working environment in a country. This is of fundamental importance. And this is of fundamental importance because many times what we see is an edge, a drive between what the hard data show and what the answers from the executives of the business sector tell us. And as you can imagine, the way that we need to facilitate that is through clear communication. And you will see later on, maybe in some responses that we get, that this is also relevant in Thailand as well. How the government must communicate certain issues to the business sector, and how the business sector must communicate back and give feedback to the different issues to the government. So, for the survey, we get tremendous help from the different partners that we have around the world. And here in Thailand, we rely effectively in the TMA very, very much. They are extremely supportive, and they help us tremendously in order to be able to conduct these surveys. We receive around 6,200 responses every year. So roughly about 100 responses from each country. And from Thailand this year, we received about 120 responses. So tremendously helpful, and we are grateful. Thank you very, very much. So the first factor is the economic performance. The Minister of the Economy mentioned very, very well that this is the strongest point of Thailand. And we see from the sub-factors where the strengths and where the areas of improvement are, right? Where the strengths, international trade, where repeatedly in many years, Thailand performs very, very well, and also the employment. Very high employment, a very low unemployment rate, very, very good conditions for this particular segment. The second factor is efficiency. In the government efficiency, Thailand ranks 22nd. Here, the fiscal policy and also the public finance are the strong components of this factor. The area where the improvement can show up is what we call societal framework. Here we have issues like different types of inequality, income inequality, gender inequality, the aging of society. All these components are going into the societal framework. And as you can see, it is colored with red just to show the difference between where the improvement must come from. The third component, the business efficiency. And in the business efficiency, labor market is the strong point. Finance actually is quite good, it's above the mid-level of our sample. And the area where improvement must come is actually the productivity. So we have the labor, but this labor is not as productive as it can be. And finally, what we have is the infrastructure. And in the infrastructure is the place where most work needs to be done. This, of course, is very well known. The minister spoke earlier and said that this is the time that many different undertakings have been prioritized by the government in order to exactly deal with these issues. And as you can see, issues related to education and the scientific infrastructure, this is what Professor Brice was discussing before about the digital, are of very, very big importance. Let me take here a step back and mention something that I hope will try to bring together a number of things that we are discussing the last few hours. Throughout all these criteria, the 258, of course, it is not a good strategy to claim that you will try to increase everything. Because by basically discussing about a strategy, in essence, what we mean is choices. Strategy will dictate that given the objective that will be formed for the country, for Thailand, then hierarchically, there has to be a choice on where the effort will be prioritized. Where are we going to actually put most of our resources and most of our effort in order to better this particular criterion? The second thing that I would like to bring is that different aspects have different time to show the returns. So if we are discussing about issues related to education, and we are discussing about educational reforms, one does not expect to see the fruit of these reforms very, very fast. As a matter of fact, it will take 10 or 15 years to materialize all this attempt. On the other hand, if one introduces a tax decrease or a tax increase, the outcome of that process will be observed by the data, both the survey, the perceptions of the managers, and the data much, much faster. So this must be taken very much into account, that it will not be something governmental undertakings. The overall ranking is the 30th position for Thailand out of these numbers. Now, if we compare that with last year, how does it show? Actually, you see the areas of improvement. There are some improvement in the infrastructure. The colored line is above the dark black, and you see some the difference between 2017 and 2018 in the government efficiency and a little bit in the business efficiency. Can we say something a little bit more specific about this? And this is what I will try by showing what are the strengths and what are the weaknesses in each factor. What we observe, if you see the top left in the economic performance, we know that the unemployment rate in Thailand is very, very low. It's a very strong point. We were discussing earlier about the tourism receipts, extremely big component of the Thai industry. And actually, this is exactly projected in our data. Another very important criteria that it may not be seen here because you take it as granted, but I can tell you that from many economists, this is of fundamental importance, is the youth unemployment, which is extremely low. And this is very, very important. On the other hand, the problems that we have, in essence, in economic performance, deal mainly with what we call international investment. And why is that? Let's go to the government efficiency and we will check this. In the government efficiency, essentially the taxes are very low, which is a very good component. And also the investment incentives are very, very good. The minister discussed about that. But what are the issues? The economy is rather restricted. It's closed, very protected. Things related to tariffs, things related to what are the benefits for foreign investors, things related to how the customs facilitate the transportation of goods are actually all areas that can be improved upon. And if we're speaking about business efficiency, the compensation levels is a good component. The national culture is a very good component. It's extremely important. But at the same time, the labor productivity is in areas that must be improved upon. And finally, when we are dealing with infrastructure, two components that we will see later on in more detail, the mobile broadband and the mobile telephony cost, are extremely good, very strong issues. But then again, in the infrastructure, things related to health, things related to the environment and education need to be improved upon. So what I show you was related to the hard data. We provide one particular question in our questionnaire where we ask the business executives, what do they think the important attractive points of their own country are? And here is what the managers from Thailand told us. And I would like you to concentrate in the top, because these were replied as the most important issues from most of the executives. And what do we see? We see a business-friendly environment, which of course, it is an internal business-friendly environment. We saw the problems with the foreign investors before, right? So internally, the business environment is very friendly. We see an open and positive attitude. We speak about the dynamism of the economy, and they speak a lot about cost competitiveness. Cost competitiveness actually is a point of particular importance for the development of the Thai economy the last 30 years. Here is the trend of the rank, and we see that it is upward moving. So the trend is positive. Thailand becomes more and more competitive. How did it manage to do that? Well, if you include the GDP per capita, you see the increase since 1995. And essentially, this increase was because of the internal markets and the the creation of middle class and the strengthening of the aggregate demand. But now, if you go a step further, and we try to see what exactly is the percentage of high technology exports of GDP, we see that this actually is an area where improvement can take place. And essentially, if this is improved, we have higher value-added exports, and we're moving up in the value chain. And this is a very important component, which of course brings us naturally in the next part of the presentation, brings us in speaking about the digital competitiveness. Professor Brice discussed before about the different research questions that we have at the center and how we try to approach what is called the fourth industrial revolution. So the need to try to put some numbers in what Professor Brice presented earlier. And the question that we had from many representatives of different countries, both the public and the private domain, in order to understanding where exactly, how well do they do, how they can approach and how they can deal with a particular disruption, led us to build the digital competitiveness ranking. Essentially, what we try to do is to assess the capacity of an economy to not only adapt, but also use the technology in its own betterment. Right? And we do that by actually studying three different factors. We study knowledge, which is the infrastructure of the process. Does a country have the capacity to understand the technology? Then the actual technology, that is, what is the development, what is the context through which the development of the technological, digital technology is enabled? And finally, the future readiness. Future readiness is very important, and you will hear a lot about that in the afternoon by Professor Gelassi when he will speak about the digital transformation for the business sector. I will try to make a connection towards the end of my presentation, but essentially what future readiness tries to give is how prepared a particular economy is for the upcoming transformations that we are discussing. Right? In each factor, we deal with several sub-factors. And these sub-factors provide us the quantification of the strengths and the weaknesses of a particular economy. So, given this setup, what can we say about Thailand? Let me first give you what exactly is the ranking, what we found out from studying the components that I told you. So these are the 10 most competitive economies with respect to digital. Very interesting point here, we see actually a geographic concentration. If you take Singapore, which is ranked number 2 out, all the other countries come from Europe. And as a matter of fact, even if we include the first 15, you will find that still Europe dominates. You also find what drives the different ranking from the 3 factors. We see that the knowledge is a very, very important component, and we see also that there is a very high variance with respect to the future readiness, how prepared an economy is. And we will discuss this a little bit in detail later on. So, in this framework, where is Thailand? Thailand is number 39. The triangle, actually, if it points up, it means that there is an improvement from last year. And if it points down, it seems that there are a couple of positions or a position lost between 2017 and 2018. Thailand actually increased its position. From 41, it ranks now 39. you see immediately where is the strong element in this digital ranking, is the technology. And in the technology, what we try to find out is whether the aspects with respect to regulation in the country, with respect to the capital availability, and in the end, with respect to the technological framework, are such that allow the technology to flourish. In this particular situation, you see that actually Thailand, this is the strong point. With respect to knowledge, you would expect that, because we discussed about the problems with respect to education, and we will see in detail what exactly is going on. And finally, with future readiness, is ranked 49. Let's try to find a little bit more in detail what exactly these things tell us. So these show the evolution for the last 5 years of the competitiveness ranking. The dashed line is the overall ranking, and you see that it's upward moving, so it becomes more and more competitive. The purple ones is dealing with knowledge, and in that respect, it is also we see an increase. The blue is the technology, clear increase, and then the green one, which seems to fluctuate around a constant trend, deals with the future readiness. Let's deal with knowledge first. So in every slide that I will show you, and I'm trying to say a few things about that, is you see what exactly are the sub-factors and how they have been evolved in the last 5 years. And then you see each criterion. And within each criterion, the empty triangle is actually where Thailand is ranked at the lowest positions in this particular situation. The filled triangle is where we see the most high ranking for Thailand. Right? So, employee training, female researchers as a percentage of researchers, very strong positions. The digital and technological skills is an area that needs to be improved, and this is clearly a part of education, the education that actually the minister was discussing earlier. So how is Thailand compared with the neighboring economies with respect to these things? I did this exercise and I tried to show for different criteria, and I took just a handful of them, how is Thailand ranked vis-a-vis Indonesia, Malaysia, the Philippines, and Singapore. Thailand is always colored with a green color. Okay. So Thailand is number 33 now. Actually, since 5 years ago, it increases. It's exactly the same position, but it had a U-shaped curve, and it ranks second throughout these economies. This is pretty good about the middle of the sample that we have. In essence, what we try to see is whether the management of the cities actually facilitates the business competitiveness. What exactly the minister was saying before about creating cities where there will be attractive poles for business development. Okay? The digital and technological skills was one aspect that we saw that actually Thailand ranks the lowest. Singapore is number 1, and Thailand has a lot of, as a matter of fact, in the last 5 years, is exactly in the same position. One may ask, this calls immediately for what exactly is going on. And in the employee training, actually, Thailand does very, very well. So here, what we try to capture is we ask the managers whether train the employees is a major priority for the companies. And this as an outcome is actually very, very important, because companies show that what they would try to do is they would try to develop the talent that they have. They don't want to just take whatever they have to offer and then put them aside. But as a matter of fact, as the business grows, the talent that it is with a business growth as well. This is related to the talent issues, the talent management that Professor Britt was discussing before. So if the employee training is very good, what is the issue? And one issue is actually what is the total expenditure, the part of GDP that is related to education. And in this area, a major decision needs to be made from the government. Of course, remember, because sometimes we get governmental officials at the center or even journalists who ask the question, so should Thailand increase the percentage that goes to education? If we ask the question like this, the answer is obvious. Absolutely yes. As a matter of fact, if I ask any question in that setup, should Thailand increase the percentage that goes towards R&D? Absolutely yes. There's not going to be no as an answer. The problem is that this is not a question that is seen in vacuum, but it is seen within the context of the whole strategy of the country. Therefore, this should be taken, if we increase the total expenditure on education, as probably it should, what are the aspects that we need to decrease? Where are we going to find the funds that we will provide to education? Is it going to be additional taxes? And what the repercussions will be from that? Or is it going to be a reallocation, and therefore we'll take some money, I don't know, maybe from the Defense Department, and put it into education? These are the important questions that need to be solved. And they need to be solved in a stakeholders level, all the stakeholders. So let's move forward. High-tech patent grants, this related with a scientific concentration of the country. And what we see is that there is room for improvement, and if the right infrastructure with respect to the scientific technology and the scientific infrastructure and technological infrastructure exists, of course this will be improved as well. Let's see what's going on with technology. In technology, what we have is the regulatory framework, capital, and technological framework. From the top, you see that the technological framework has the highest ranking, 23. And why is that? We spoke before, mobile brand subscribers and high-tech exports. These are the two areas where Thailand actually performs very well. And they can do even better than that. This is definitely the area. What are the issues? Well, it's very interesting, but the internet users as a number is very, very low. Why is that? Is it the availability of Wi-Fi? Or is it that the potential users do not have the capacity right now? This is something that needs to be explored. Let's try to see what are the issues. A particular component that is very, very important is related with the institutional framework that Thailand and the rest of the world works. And a particular component that's very, very important, and this is also very important for the foreign investors that we were discussing before, is the intellectual property rights. So whether these are facilitated according to a fair system. And here it seems that Thailand has a room for improvement, and it can do better than that. Singapore is the highest in this group of countries, number 6. And of course, Philippines and Indonesia need to do the same exercise as well. What exactly is going on with how valuable the sector related to the IT is for Thailand? And we see that for this aspect, Thailand is ranked among these countries in the 3rd position. It is in the upper 3rd, pretty much, of our sample. What about investment risk? In other words, what is the risk of the country? How is this perceived, especially from the outside investors? And what we see is that the risk is quite high. Right? And this is something that takes time to improve. It takes time because you build on credibility and you build on aspects that facilitate in the lowering of a risk. By the way, a particular aspect that is related with that is, of course, and that's why I brought that here, the international property rights aspects, institutional aspects like the international property rights. And of course, this is also related directly with the foreign investments that we were discussing in the beginning. In the wireless broadband, that is the penetration per 100 people, Thailand is second in the group this year, ranked number 21. This is a very, very good outcome. And in some respect, if you have this capacity, you are expecting that other issues, like the internet users that we were discussing before, will improve upon. But of course, it takes time. It doesn't happen instantaneously. And finally, Thailand is doing very, very well in the average internet bandwidth speed, which is also a component for internet users. So you see how this whole thing is connected. Finally, let's discuss a little bit about the future readiness. The main question that we were trying to address when we start dealing with this issue was related to how a country will be able to deal, to react to a potential disruption. This is a very important question. It's a very difficult question to answer as well. And the reason it is difficult is because it really depends on how we define disruption. If disruption is defined in the very general, broad way as something that we don't know and we don't expect, of course it's very difficult to estimate and quantify how a country will do so. If we know what is coming, we take that into consideration. And by taking into consideration, we have alternative plans. But if we don't, then it's very, very difficult to even know what exactly is coming. So if we take the extreme situation, and this is what we thought, if we take the situation that a disruption is something that, an uncertain occurrence that we don't know exactly how to deal with, then which country is the one that has the highest probability of addressing it in a positive and a successful way? And then we thought that similarly to us, when we are dealing with unexpected disruptions in our lives, those of us who are successful in dealing with these events are the ones that are flexible, are the ones that are easy to adapt to new situations. So we try to take this notion and incorporate it in the component of a country. And therefore, we try to find what exactly is the flexibility with respect to individuals in a country. And this is what adaptive attitudes tries to capture. Adaptive attitudes tries to capture from an individual point of view, how adaptive, how flexible are we in undertaking all the new technologies available and use them in a productive way in our daily life. And these are related with the participation. How do we participate in social situations and governmental issues? Internet retailing. Professor Brice was discussing before about cryptocurrencies. He was discussing before about tokenization of assets. He was discussing before about the ability to trade through internet. Well, in order to reach this level, we have to observe a willingness to participate on that. And how willing are we, right? What exactly is the possession that allow us to have this flexibility? And finally, what is our attitudes with respect to things that we don't know? What are our attitudes with respect to the unknown out there? Because this also turns back to us over the attitudes of the new technologies that we don't know. in addition to individuals, we have what's going on with businesses. And this is a very, very important component. Professor Gelasi is going to speak about the agility earlier. As a matter of fact, agile companies is a very, very important component of successful companies nowadays. This is the outcome of research that is taking place within IMD in other centers. So we try to measure what exactly is going on with the businesses, how flexible, so to speak, businesses are. And this is what we try to capture with the business agility. And I'm spending much more time here in order to connect both what Professor Brice was saying before and what Professor Gelasi will tell you immediately after lunch. And finally, whether we have all the digital aspects through the information technology being integrated both at the individual level and at the business level. And this is captured by the IT integration. By the way, before I go any further and discuss about these numbers, let me say that a very big component of the things that we are discussing has to do with the social aspects, values, and beliefs in each country. Yesterday, we had a very interesting discussion with Professor Zaki, whom you're going to meet tomorrow, and he will discuss with you what exactly is the experience of Switzerland. Switzerland, in this particular e-participation, actually is ranked lower than 48. And despite the fact that Professor Brice was saying before how an important power within this digitalization world Switzerland is, yet what we see in Switzerland is that from the point of view of individuals, well, this, at least in the e-participation, does not follow through. Why? And this is a question of the values. We have asked, because when we did the first study last year, we were very, very surprised by this result. But then we realized that the people in Switzerland value their individual connection that they have, for instance, with a bank teller or with a person in the city hall that they go and they do all the work. And as a matter of fact, precisely because they're worried over privacy, they prefer to have this personal relation than to have an e-participation higher ranking. Will this change? Undoubtedly it will, but it takes a little bit of time, because it takes a little bit of time to adapt in the new elements. Again, what I try to say is that there is not really one prescription for all the countries to be followed. And despite the fact that Switzerland leads in many, many aspects in this digital journey, nevertheless, there are other areas where the people take a completely different path. Okay. Let's go back to Thailand. So, what do we see? We see, of course, a situation with the ownership of devices that will allow one to participate in the internet. And of course, given that these two elements exist, the internet retailing, it's obvious that cannot happen. And also it's obvious what we saw in the previous graph about the internet usage. But the encouraging thing is that towards globalization, the attitude is positive. So the element is there. This is with respect to the adaptive attitudes. This is with respect to the individuals, right? What exactly is going on with businesses? Well, businesses actually are about in the middle of the whole sample. And as a matter of fact, if you see, is the one that consistently ranks above others. So in principle, the businesses are agile. And with the IT integration, again, there are two elements here that drive the ranking down. The one is related with e-government. That is the ability of the government to incorporate internet means in order to make different decisions and get feedback from citizens. However, given these issues here, you would expect this number to be low, right? So it's not surprising. But another issue which is related with institutional framework that we were discussing before is the software piracy. So in this particular issue, again, within the institutional element that we were discussing before, this is something that can be addressed. So how is Thailand compared with the other countries? Internet retailing, we discussed. As a matter of fact, in most countries that we are dealing here in this slide, Thailand belongs in this group, right? So it's not particularly surprising. And what we have is that Singapore is actually at the top, but again, ranked 26th. Attitudes towards globalization, very important for Thailand. Ranked third in this group of countries, but also in the upper third of our sample. So this is very, very important. And e-government, we discussed the reasons why we have these low numbers. And software privacy is definitely something that Thailand needs to address. It needs to address in order to be able to attract businesses and international talent to come here and facilitate these aspects in the Thai economy. So, what can we learn about what we discussed? I would like to show the relationship between future readiness, this is the last component that I show you, and some aspects of productivity. And the reason I chose that is, of course, because from the first part of the presentation, we saw that productivity is an area that needs to be improved upon. And from the second part, we show that future readiness, especially after the discussion that Professor Brice had before, is a very important component. So if we deal with all our countries, and let me explain what's going on here, and then the next couple of slides will be very easy to follow. So in the horizontal axis, what I have is the ranking of the future readiness, right? The smaller the number, the higher the rank of this particular economy with respect to its capacity to be prepared for the future. And the lower the number, the lower the rank. Right? In the vertical axis, I have the overall productivity of labor, the overall productivity per person, per person employed. So what do we see? We see a very strong negative relationship. That is, countries that exhibit very high overall productivity in their economy are the same as the countries that are ranked very highly with respect to their preparedness for future disruptions. Right? Thailand, you see, is here. An aspect that was brought several times from the Minister of the Economy earlier today was the small and medium enterprises. Undoubtedly, small and medium enterprises in all the economies are a very, very important component for the competitiveness. Right? What is the relationship between how efficient the small and medium enterprises are and future preparedness? As you can imagine, is similar. That's why I'm showing this to you, right? What do we have? Again, we have countries that the small and medium enterprise sector is very, very efficient compared to the international levels, right? Are the countries also that perform very well and they are ranked very high in terms of preparedness for the future. And finally, if we go down to labor productivity, we will find that labor productivity per person employed and their capacity per person, the individual, of how flexible the individuals are, that is the adaptive attitude, is also very, very strong and negatively related. That is, economies in which its citizens show a high level of flexibility, a high level of adaptation, are the same as countries that exhibit a very high level of labor productivity. And here is the 3 different rankings for Thailand. I would like to close with the following note. Essentially, if I try to summarize everything that we discussed, we show that there are many strong positive aspects in the economy of Thailand, and we show that there are some areas where improvement can take place. The areas where the improvement can take place are related with the societal framework, and they're related with the infrastructure. Well, what is the positive thing for somebody who studies the Thai economy? For me, that I was preparing for this presentation for the last weeks, is that I show that with a new national development plan, the 20-year that started in 2017 until 2036, essentially the Economics Reform Committee identified 3 pillars. And you're not going to be surprised to hear that the 3 pillars are related with the competitiveness level, of course, with issues related to inequality and inclusive growth, which is exactly what I was saying the last 40 minutes about the inequality, gender, income, the societal framework, but also what exactly you do with the foreign investment. How do you incorporate the stakeholders of this economy? And third, policy changes and, most importantly, institutional reforms related with the software piracy, related to international, the intellectual property rights, and so on and so forth. So the positive thing out of this exercise is that Thai decision makers really have identified the issues of the economy and very, very actively try to address them. So I think that if the communication level between the different stakeholders, between the government and the business sector and the rest of the decision makers is enhanced, undoubtedly, a few years from now, I hope that I will be here and I will show you a completely different set of numbers. And on that note, I thank you very, very much. Thank you.